Welcome to Sleepless Readings. Tonight we'll be reading a tale called I Think My Condition Saved My Life. I was born with SEPA, congenital insensitivity to pain and anhidrosis. It's a rare condition where the affected, that'd be me, can't feel pain of any sort, and we aren't able to sweat, which makes us prone to overheating. It's supposedly hereditary, although as far as I can tell, neither of my parents suffer from it. My mom says that when I was born, I'd have broken bones all the time, as well as deep gashes in random places on my body. She'd often have to give me cold baths to stop me overheating in the steamy Florida climate.
Never cried a wink, though,
she told me with a warm smile.
You were my little soldier.
I never understood pain. Never got why kids would keel over, grasping their knees after falling off a skateboard, or cry out like a banshee after falling from their bike. When it would happen to me, I'd simply stand up with bloodied body parts, wipe the dirt off, smearing blood across my knees or elbows, and hop right back on the bike. My parents never saw a reason to stop me from doing things just because of my condition. I'd often go outside and play with the neighborhood kids, running the streets and playing games like freeze tag or hide and seek. The games would end in one of two ways. Either with me limping home at the end of the day, only to find that I'd broken my ankle early in the game, the constant walking and running on the already fractured bones having caused them to shatter and grind down into a fine dust, rendering the appendage useless, or with me laying on the ground, passed out on the verge of a heat stroke. My friends knew what to do in this situation though, just grab the hose and douse me till I came to. I've had multiple surgeries, mostly bone and cartilage replacements, all without anesthesia. Because of my condition, doctors decided it was both dangerous and a waste of resources. I never argued. Pain is such a foreign concept that I don't quite understand why anyone would need that stuff in the first place. It made surgeries go by much quicker, and helped keep the bills slightly lower for the sake of my mom and dad's finances. High school was tough. Once the bullies caught wind of my condition, they became relentless, determined to beat the pain back into me. I left school on 3 occasions by way of ambulance. Cloudy-headed, blood leaking from my ears, skull cracked. My mother decided that the 3rd time was enough and pulled me out of public school, opting for bully-free homeschooling instead. As I grew older, I became more cautious. I didn't want to spend any more of my life in a hospital bed, so I got a job working at the reception desk for a risk management company in Orlando. A fitting occupation, if I say so myself. And a short time later, I rented a small 1-bedroom apartment. I awoke one night, my body was incredibly hot, and my mouth was a desert. The air conditioning in my apartment had been on the fritz, and in my sleep, it had gone out completely. I'd begun to overheat, thanks for that, anhidrosis. And if I didn't get into a cold bath quickly, I'd start having seizures or slip into a coma. I stumbled through the dark, heading to the bathroom to drop into a cold bath, when I smashed my foot into the corner of my IKEA coffee table. I looked down reluctantly, seeing 4 of my toes turned at unnatural angles, the bones bulging out in large lumps, threatening to break through the skin. Damn it, I said, rolling my eyes, hobbling over to the bathroom. I turned the faucet to the coldest setting and got in. As I laid there, basking in the cool water and resetting my toes, I had an idea. I decided to decorate the walls and other hard surfaces in my home with fluffy mats or foam egg crates. And to my pleasure, it worked. Not only did it protect my body from blunt trauma, but it made my apartment virtually silent. A few days passed and I settled back into the monotony of things. My landlord, slumlord, fixed the air conditioning in my apartment and I went about my life as normal. I woke the next night in a heated stupor. My mouth was arid and sticky, my skin was red with warmth. I stood and stumbled through the living room once again. My mind had begun to short circuit. My vision became blurred and my thoughts became static. I needed to get to the bathtub quickly. I flipped on the faucet and stumbled in, not even taking the time to remove my clothes. The only thing on my mind was cooling my body down. The tub filled up as I drifted off into a state of dreary, heat-induced comatose. But it seemed to be working. My consciousness became clearer as time passed, and after about 8 minutes of soaking in that shockingly cold water, I felt myself coming to. I removed my clothes and tossed them into a soaking heap on the floor. Then laid in the bathtub for another 45 minutes. I felt my eyelids getting heavy and decided that it was time to get out of the tub. On top of that, I was still terribly thirsty. I pulled the drain plug, stood, and let the air wash over my body. I snatched the towel off the rack and wrapped it around my waist, then headed out to the kitchen. My apartment was dark and foreboding. The lack of noise rendered even my own footsteps inaudible. It was as if I simply floated across the floor like some ghost in the night. I worked my way across the living room and into the kitchen, pulling open the refrigerator door and reaching in for a cold bottle of water. I downed the bottle, washing away the dryness and letting the moisture encompass my mouth. When I pulled the empty bottle away from my face, I nearly fainted. I heard the plastic clank to the ground and let out a series of hollow thuds as it settled. My heart fell deep into my bowels, twisting my insides in knots. Across my kitchen, illuminated only by the pale yellow light of my refrigerator, was the figure of a human. It was a large, foreboding shape, standing at least 6.5 feet tall with broad, intimidating shoulders. Its features were hidden by a black ski mask. Its body was covered in black as well, save for its hands, which were exposed. Whoa, man, I said, backing slowly away and raising my hands in surrender. Take whatever you want. I don't have much, but you can take it. I won't even call the cops. He advanced towards me with a slow, deliberate, and utterly silent step. I gulped, realizing that in that moment, perhaps the silence which I'd grown to love and welcome had betrayed me. Come on, man, I promise. I won't tell anyone. Just take what you want and go, I swear. I had resorted to begging, but the man simply remained silent, continuing towards me. I backed myself into a wall and panic began to set in. I frantically looked around my kitchen, trying to keep an eye on the intruder while simultaneously searching for anything to use as a weapon. The silent psycho slowly stepped in front of the fridge, casting a large shadow on the opposing wall.
All I want,
he said in a raspy voice,
is to hear you scream.
He laughed an evil, gut-wrenching laugh. I saw a glint of silver as he brandished a long blade. Then the light slowly shrank into nothing as he pulled the refrigerator door closed and darkness surrounded me. Silent, horrible black. I strafed along the wall, moving from the kitchen into the living room, feeling around for the light switch to no avail. The feeling that he was right behind me, breathing down my neck and prepared to take the kill, nipped at my senses. My legs moved beneath me, sending me stumbling into the living room and tripping onto the coffee table. Wood splintered below me and I could feel swelling pressure in my right arm. I shuffled to my feet and darted across the room. The wall came quickly, but I paid it no mind. I felt around in a panic until finally that small plastic switch came beneath my fingers. I flipped it up. White light flooded the room, revealing the intruder. He stood behind the crooked couch, staring at me with horrible fury. He hurdled the sofa, stomping his heavy leather boots over the crushed remains of my cheap table, and advanced on me with intense speed. He held the blade out in front of him, coming in for his attack. I turned and bolted back towards my bedroom, bursting through the door and slamming it shut. I got a grip on the dresser, ready to push it in front of the door, and he burst through. I backed away and felt something come from behind me. My legs swept out from under me and I fell back onto the soft, pillow-topped mattress of my bed. I shuffled back, but it was too late. The psychopath had jumped onto the bed and pinned me down.
Please, man,
I yelled.
Why, just let me go, please.
He didn't respond. Instead, he snatched my hand up in his, and in a quick motion, he slid the blade across the second knuckle of my forefinger. The tip popped off with a snap and blood began to spill from the wound, coating me in a layer of red.
What?
I said, confused.
Please, man, just let me go. I promise I won't tell anyone, I swear.
My voice had dropped to a whisper. He looked at me quizzically, cocking his head to the side like a confused dog. Then he frustratingly took hold of my hand and knocked my middle finger in the same spot. Blood began to ooze down my hand.
Please, man, please.
I begged, my voice still low.
I don't understand,
he said defeatedly.
I don't get it. I don't get it. Why? Just why? Why won't you scream?
He slashed a deep gash in my chest in frustration.
Please,
I mumbled. He jumped from the bed and backed himself against the wall.
Why won't he scream? Why won't he scream?
I watched as he slowly fell into the dark pits of his own mind.
Why won't he scream? Why won't he scream?
He perked his head up.
Pain,
he said.
You have to feel pain. Everyone has to feel pain. Pain is the truth, isn't it? Pain? What is pain?
I started, prepared to tell him about my condition, but fell silent as he spoke again.
Pain is nothing,
he said flatly. Suddenly he raised the knife. I winced and shut my eyes, expecting him to come for me and take his final blow. But what I saw as I peeked from beneath my eyelids was nothing that I expected. He plunged the knife deep into his thigh, held it for a moment, and let out an ear-shattering squeak. He quickly yanked it out, allowing bright red arterial blood to spurt from the wound and shoot across the room. The man shriveled to the ground, gripping his leg tightly. I continued staring in horror, unmoving, jaw agape as the man before me slowly collapsed to the ground. After about 5 minutes of staring, shaken to my core, I began to feel a bit lightheaded. I looked down at my bed beneath me and noticed the pool of blood had spread around me significantly. I quickly snatched my cell phone from the side table and dialed 911, but found it inordinately difficult to speak. I'd lost too much blood and was going into shock. "Help," I said into the phone just before everything faded to black. I awoke in a hospital bed the next day, surrounded by uniformed police officers.
What happened?
I asked as I came to.
We received a 911 call.
One officer said, a red-headed man covered in freckles. He proceeded to explain what had happened, telling me about the man they found on my floor, who they informed me was a confirmed psychopath and sadist by the name of Charles Banks.
He's been evading us for months,
the officer said.
His therapist told us he went off his medication back in February, and that he believed Charles to be a danger to society. We have sufficient evidence connecting him to a dozen murders in the area, all of which showed signs of intense torture, namely the removal of the fingers as well as sexual assault. You're quite lucky to be alive, young man.
A thought crossed my mind in that moment. Charles wanted to hear me scream. He wanted to watch me hurt, to see me in pain. He wanted to get off on it, and when I didn't feel his pain, he began to question his reality. I shuddered and swallowed a lump in my throat. I always thought my condition would kill me one day. Never did I expect that it would save my life. Thank you for listening. That was I Think My Condition Saved My Life. If you enjoyed that, please consider subscribing for more. I release a new story every Sunday. And as always, stay sleepless.